Hi, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. This is the show that goes beyond the data to explore the people, the stories, and all of the insights that drive business success. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and thank you for joining us. If you're a business owner, today you're going to want to hear about a great conversation about taking your business from chaos to control. And you know what I'm talking about when I say chaos. And I am pleased to welcome Jim Emerich, who's the founder and CEO at Backbone CFO. Jim, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Dave, thanks for having me, man. It's been a long time coming, and we've developed a great relationship over the last year or so. So thankful to be here.
It's going to be a good conversation because I know you're going to add a ton of value for our audience. I work with business owners all day, every day, and a lot of them just don't have the financial sophistication. They're good at what they do, their trade, their skill, their craft, what have you. So really want to unpack this important conversation. But before we jump into that, tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what's Backbone CFO.
Sure. So I would say, when people ask me, who am I? What do I do? For a long time after starting the business, I would kind of go right into that. But what I realized is, I think I'm probably best characterized at this point in my life as an entrepreneur. And I love business. I love all types of businesses. I we'll get into what we do as a company, but I think what we do does enable me to see such a vast array of different operating companies and different industries and markets. And I would say first and foremost, Dave, I'm an entrepreneur. I founded a company called Backbone CFO in 2022. Which, believe it or not, we're going in. This is our fourth year of business. It's pretty wild to think it's already that old. But we're a fractional CFO firm, and what that means is we serve growing entrepreneurial-led businesses. As a fractional CFO, we're a part-time CFO, coming in and alongside a business owner, an entrepreneur, to help them have a strategic partner at the leadership level, and really just leverage decades of entrepreneurial CFO level experience to help them scale their business. I very simply put, we can get in the weeds, but at the highest level, I tell people all the time, we bring three things to the table. We bring financial leadership, so somebody sitting at the leadership level alongside the business owner. We bring decades of perspective, which is hard to replicate if you've never sat in the seat before yourself. And then last but not least, and this can be so undervalued, Dave, but you understand it, and that is accountability. We can bring all the financial tools in the world to the table, but if we lack the ability to hold the owner, the business owner, the entrepreneur accountable for results, it's all for naught. So we bring those three things to the table. We love working with contractors, manufacturers, complex industrial businesses. That's kind of our jam. That's a little bit about who I am and what we do.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I would add a fourth item to your list when you're talking to your clients because you hit it on the head when you said you're an entrepreneur. So you understand, you're uniquely qualified to understand what their pain points are because
I would
you
agree.
yourself are an entrepreneur. So
Yep.
don't forget that. And when you talk about accountability, I know you guys run on EOS, and the
Yep.
firm I'm with now does as well, and that brings a lot of accountability to the conversation, and it's so important. Let me take it from the top, Jim, because again, in my world, I serve a lot of business owners, and the question always comes to when is a business really ready to bring on a fractional CFO?
Yeah.
There's a lot of them that have the bookkeepers. Maybe it's a member of the family who has a title of CFO,
Yeah.
but they're a safe distance from real CFO as you and I would define them.
Yeah. It's a great question. And certainly there is not a silver bullet answer to this. But I'll qualify my answer by saying, or speaking to the business types of businesses that we typically work with. So again, if you're from a market perspective, if you're in that manufacturing, construction, heavy construction, restoration type of environments, I would tell you once you approach the $5 million revenue marker, you're now in the realm of consideration for how do I get a strategic finance partner to help me continue to scale. And I would say from what we've seen, the top line of where that fractional CFO value starts to diminish in the sense that it probably requires more of a full-time CFO is somewhere in that $50 million top line revenue, maybe a little bit more than that. But so somewhere between 5 on the low end to 50 million on the high end in top line revenue But that's obviously a very generalization,
Sure.
because you could be a $25 million company and plateauing and not wanting to grow. You have no business needing a fractional CFO, right? So revenue is a good qualifier to an extent. However, I would also argue that, if you're listening to this and you're a business owner, I think one of the things you have to grapple with yourself, and this is not something anyone else can answer but you, are you looking to grow? Are you looking to scale your company for a myriad of reasons? And we can get into that. But if the answer is yes, I think if you're in that revenue range, you're qualified, and you should be looking at having a strategic partner in the finance seat sitting right next to you, tied to the hip, evaluating everything you do, looking at cash flow and forecasting and projections, enterprise value, all the things we can talk a lot about. But that's when you're quote unquote ready.
You're speaking my love language there with cash flow projections and enterprise value. As a
Yes.
valuation person, that's those are the buzzwords I live with every day. And far too often, when I ask my clients, "Do you have a forecast?" The answer is no. I
Yep.
actually had to write an article about that to share so that people understand the value in having it. But why
Yep.
don't we just spend a minute, since I'm pontificating here? Why don't I let you explain to our audience why it's so important to have a financial plan and to think about the future?
Yeah, it's crazy. And I'll tell you, I don't know. I'm gonna put, between me and my firm, we probably speak to somewhere around 50 to 60 business owners a month, between clients, prospects, etc. Right? In the revenue ranges I just mentioned, in the industries that I just mentioned. And I will tell you that if you're not working with a fractional CFO, I'm totally making this number up, but it's just based on personal experience and fully Jim's subjective view on this, which I feel like I have a fairly good read, is 90%, 95% of business owners are not looking past next month in writing, in a spreadsheet, in a forecast, in a projection. So you mentioned the love language. I always tell clients the love language of business is money. And if you can't translate your vision and your plans into a financial roadmap that speaks in dollars and cents over time, you're going to have a real big issue at some point in the future, right? Whether it's internally, managing day-to-day accounting, finance, assets, etc., or at some point we'll talk more about enterprise value, but you're talking to some external stakeholder, a bank, a potential buyer, whoever it might be, an investor, and you can't translate well what you have up here into some kind of financial roadmap. And that's a big challenge, Dave. And I think, again, I would put the number at 90, 95%, maybe more. Business owners just can't do it, haven't done it, don't want to do it, don't have the capability to do it. And by the way, that's totally okay. But somebody needs to, and somebody has to hold the business accountable to be able to speak that love language, which again, we're talking about money, and we're talking about translating that future state into financials.
Yeah, I would have to anecdotally agree with you on the percentage of business owners that are not doing forecasting. And one of the big things about a forecast is it's a decision tool. It's a strategic planning
Yeah.
mechanism. And I always tell people it's a living document.
Yep.
You've got to adjust it on the fly so that you can be not only reactive but proactive in how you think about running your operation.
Absolutely. And to add to that, one of the things I'll often say especially on a sales call, somebody will say, "Hey," and I think business owners intuitively get to a point where they know they need something like this. You might not, if you're listening, you're a business owner, you might not be able to articulate it perfectly, and that's okay. But you get to a point where deep down, man, I don't have the visibility that I need. And some of the things that start to come out of the people's mouths that I talk to oftentimes sound like this. Jim, this literally happened last week. I have a follow-up call today with a business owner about $12 million in sales. They're growing. They have a goal aspiration to get to 20 million in revenue. Jim, I need a budget. Well, hang on. Do you need a budget? No one who's telling you need a budget. And the truth is that a budget is a static document that you set, let's say in December of 2025 for the following fiscal year of 2026. Well, that's trash, man. It's trash 3 months after you take all the time, energy, effort to develop it. And I used to do that as an in-house CFO. And I realized, especially for a growing small business that is dynamic at its core, has to be agile to survive. A static budget is garbage. So what we've done is we've completely thrown that out the window. We don't do budgets at all. But what we do is we invest into financial projections that are dynamic and modeled, meaning that we can create the template, if you want to call it that, or the baseline. And every single month, especially for a growing business, we should be reevaluating it and adjusting it. How's the market playing out? What's the revenue forecast? How's your compensation based on and hiring headcount versus what the plan was? How is overhead adjusting? What about, I mean, how many clients right now in the last 3 years have variable rate interest rates on their lines of credit? I remember in 2022, or 2021, 2022, it was like a no-brainer. Go out and leverage your line of credit as much as humanly possible. It's a 3% interest rate. Today, it's 9% on an SBA 7A loan. So that is a wildly, in a very short window of time, that changed dramatically. If you had a static budget in 2023 based on leveraging your line of credit and what you thought interest expense and debt service would be, you're out of your mind to not be changing that once a month. So these are just little things that, we've just decided, hey, budgets, you don't need it. But what you do need is a living, breathing document that we call a financial projection that looks out at least a year, possibly 2 to 3 years, depending on the size of the company, month over month. And this is what we call a decision-making tool.
Yeah, and that's a great distinction, the budget versus a forecast. Budget's a great thing to offer your kids so they learn how to manage their income and their outflows.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely a very important distinction. Wanted to ask you, and I stole this at the top of the program, the expression chaos to control. That's your line. So attribution where it's due. And I know that you bring control to the business chaos, and I know you've got a program and a plan that what you do it. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you do in the day-to-day realm, the roles of your CFO team, and how you're bringing the control and stability to businesses that are otherwise experiencing that chaos.
Yeah, it's a great question. And that term or phrase was really birthed out of just I felt like after doing this for years, I was having the same conversation over and over again. And I would get in, or a company would get into an engagement with a client, and they'd be growing. They have all these aspirations, and they are growing. And it just, if I could summarize the feelings that the business owner would communicate to me, it was chaos. This business is chaos. And chaos in many realms, right? Not just finances. You talk about people, you talk about your systems. I mean, everything's breaking when you scale, right? And on some level, there's just a reality to that in growing a business, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I don't believe that that's a state that a business owner needs to stay in for the duration of their growth journey. I don't believe that that's a feeling or an experience or an emotion that the business owner a weight that the business owner has to carry and feel like this is just my lot as an entrepreneur. And I just got frustrated with it. And I said, you know what? We can't remove every obstacle and variable to entrepreneurship. Impossible. But what we can do is bring a level of control to this. So this idea of like chaos to control model or chaos to control theory, if you will, was kind of birthed as a result. And what that is at its highest level, this chaos to control financial model is a framework that we believe if you institute in your business, regardless of shape, size, or color, you will have more control and more visibility, more clarity around the growth of your business as it pertains to the financial aspect of or domain of your business. And those 5 components at a high level are very simple. We have cash, we have profit, we have people, we have systems, and position. So those are the 5 components: cash, profit, people, systems, and position. And we can take a deep dive into each of them. But the case in point here is that if you can get control over these 5 areas of your business, your financial reality as you scale will feel a lot less chaotic and a lot more control-like. And you'll have a lot more clarity, sleep a lot better, and I believe make a lot better. You'll be positioned or postured to make much better proactive financial decisions if you do that.
Yeah, let's unpack a couple of these if you don't mind, because I think it's important to do so. Everybody's heard the expression "cash is king."
Yep.
Why is that the case, and what do business owners need to understand around that construct?
Yeah, I mean, it's why it's number one in the framework. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think anyone who's running a $10 million business or more, whatever, you understand fully that cash is king. I've heard it said recently, like that. Well, number one, everyone kind of knows the general statistics. 85% of businesses go out of business as a direct result of lack of cash. Vern Harnish said it probably most perfectly in his book, Scaling Up. You can get by with decent people. You can get by with decent strategy. You can get by with decent execution, but you cannot get by one day without cash. It's impossible. It doesn't work. So it goes first. You got to figure out cash. And when we talk about cash, beyond cash is king, well, that's great. What do we do with that? We think about it in two very simple terms, and then we move on to profit. But number one, you have to create visibility in cash, which means you need to have a active cash flow forecasting management plan in place. It's not sufficient enough just to look at your bank account and hope you can make payroll next week. And if that's the extent of your cash flow management system, again, if you're listening, and we've all been there, I'm not saying like if you're there, this is like you've done something completely wrong. If you're going to scale, and that's the context of this whole conversation, that won't work. So creating visibility, we like a 13-week cash flow forecasting tool, or at least at minimum a month-to-month cash flow forecasting tool. So we're making proactive decisions. If we know 3 months from now that we have a cash flow problem, it's coming, well, I have 90 days now to figure that out, as opposed to, oh crap, we can't make payroll next week. That's a challenge, but 90 days to figure, most entrepreneurs with 90 days can do a lot of damage in a good way, right? But with a week's notice, we're in trouble. So it's a simple idea of creating visibility. And then the second one, as it relates to cash, is simply levers. So it's not enough just to create visibility in cash. We need more of it. So how do we create more cash? Well, we can do things like, and again, in the context of our businesses we work with, we talk a lot about ideas around cash conversion cycle, inventory management. How much inventory do you really need to hold on the balance sheet, right? We've worked with a couple clients recently holding $4, $5, $6 million of inventory in the balance sheet. And but we look at inventory turns and we look at cost of goods sold over a given period, we realize, hey, what would it take and what would happen or what would need to be true for us to create $1 million more in cash by reducing your inventory balance by 25%? And would that completely upside down your world? And when we kind of walk through it, I think in a lot of cases, businesses that have inventory feel like it's a safety net. And to an extent it is, it's your future revenue, right? To a degree. So, but sometimes that can be overloaded. Another one that we see a lot is work in progress. Hey, we have a lot of underbillings, or we're way over billing, and then we're having a tough time putting that side to, that project cash aside for future expenses on these projects. And now we're upside down on a project 6 months later because those milestone payments that we got weren't properly managed and we're way over billed. So these are things that we can do to help create more cash or help create better cash flow, and many others. But you have to create visibility. And then you have to use levers. Levers create more cash.
Yeah, really good stuff there. Appreciate you sharing that. I want to unpack profit a little bit because, people want to be making money, but
Yes.
There's so much confusion when you talk about the word profit. And what I mean is business owners are inundated with how to think about it. Are we talking about gross profit, net income, EBIT, EBITDA? Where do we start?
Yeah. Again, I'll die on the hill of simplify. So we talk about a profit in two components. Number one, and is the most important component of profit, is your gross profit. If you don't have gross profit, we have no business talking about EBITDA. It just doesn't exist, right? So we have to manage gross profit first. And again, so just for the business owners listening, gross profit is simply the product service level profitability that your operation creates. So if you're a manufacturer, you're going to have your revenue on product or widget A, B, and C, less your cost of goods sold, might be direct labor, materials, blah, blah, blah. So that's going to be your gross profit. Why we need to manage that first is number one, and we'll talk more about enterprise value and all those fun things, but gross profit really at its core is a reflection of your operations. It's a reflection of how efficient your core business is. So forget marketing, forget for a second. We're not talking about your facility cost and your overhead and your consumables and all that stuff. We're simply talking about how efficient are you running your operation? And I think this is a really this hits home to a lot of operators, right? Because this is kind of where a lot of operating business owners, entrepreneurs, they lean into this, right? They're the expert machinist, or they're the expert manufacturing person, or whatever construction person, whatever the business is. This is your baby, right? This you've built your bread and butter on this thing right here. But how effective is it? And again, I think this understanding of gross profit comes in many shapes and forms. But number one, what are you benchmarking your gross profit against? So in your business, a lot of businesses we're working with, ideal, we're shooting for that 50% plus gross profit margin. How are you actually doing relative to the market that you're in? And do you understand that? Because again, when we go down to talk about enterprise value and potentially exiting, and at some point, some stakeholder is going to come in here and say, "Oh my gosh, Dave's business operating at 35% gross profit. Well, industry standard's 50%. What is he doing wrong?" Right now, we could talk about how that detracts to the value of your business, but forget all that for a second. At minimum, you're running your business today. Do you understand your gross profit, and is it at an industry standard or better? And if not, why not? And are you able to evaluate that? Do you see your gross profit? Do you have an accounting system that enables you to accurately track that or not? Do you have confidence in what that number says in the P&L every month? Or are you looking at it at all? So these are things that, again, we would tackle first. And once we move beyond gross profit, now we do need to, again, I'm going to keep it simple. We need to look at operating profit in some way. Common terms that I think, business owners listening to this podcast would understand is EBITDA, right? So we're looking at your businesses. So we've talked about gross profit. Now we're kind of going below the line. So we have a gross profit, and we have to now look at your operating expenses, right? So we're looking at things like maybe overhead salaries, management salaries, benefits, insurance costs, business insurance, workers' comp, fringe. Potentially there's facility costs that are not directly attributable to your product or service. Maybe there's marketing and selling costs. Maybe you have a sales staff, right? These are commissions. These are all things that are quote unquote below the line, below the gross profit line. And we need to capture this. And again, a lot to unpack here, but I would ask you, if you're listening to this podcast, you're a business owner, ask yourself two questions, or really one question framed in two ways. Do my overhead expenses, my SG&A, selling, general, administrative, it could be labeled either. Do these things support my growth initiatives or not? Do these expenses support my growth or not? And I think we can get fat in our overhead or SG&A very, very quickly. Right. I'm going to pick on marketing for a second, just because I see it all the time, where we want to produce more revenue. We want to produce more sales. The sales staff they want more leads, right? And who doesn't? So we just go heavy on marketing and SEO and agency spend and ad spend and all the things. And there's literally no accountability around this thing that now all of a sudden is costing $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a month. Right. And what is it producing? And we could pick on a lot of things. That's one. But the simple answer question is this spend supporting growth or not? And if the answer is yes, my next question, we're going to go back to EOS for a second, but what's the measurable around that? How are you connecting that $10,000, $20,000 a month back to an ROI? And maybe it's not always direct to sales, right? And that's fair. But surely there should be some level of measurement around why that's an important spend for you and how it's supporting the overall vision and growth for your company. And if it's not, and let's face it, we all have some of that. If it's not, are you looking at it and saying, how do I get out of this expense, this contract? How do I replace this with a lower cost service? How do I remove it altogether? But this is going to impact what we famously hear, this EBITDA. Right. So you have your gross profit. We've talked about all these SG&A, and then it's your EBITDA, or your operating profit. Simply put, this is now the cash flow of the business. This is we're not talking about debt service yet. We're not talking about how your assets are depreciating and all the things you're doing on the balance sheet that could potentially impact net profit. But we are simply looking at your gross product profit, which is your product service level profitability, and your operating costs. And now subtract that out. We're looking at how your business runs. And at this point, this is where we have to look at the business owner and say, hey, are you achieving the 15, 20% EBITDA that you really want? And do you know what your number is? Do you know what, again, industry standard would be or industry best in class? And this is going to directly impact or influence when we start talking about things like debt service for additional financing. This is going to directly impact things like enterprise value. And maybe your industry does have a multiple and we have to talk about valuation. Maybe there is an exit plan in place or a transition plan to create this as a legacy business for your kids. This is a really important number. We want to drive this. It's not the be all end all, but it is important. And we do need to have clarity around what it is.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. Let me just unpack a couple of the terms for maybe the uninitiated. We've talked about EOS a couple of times here. It stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it brings structure, discipline, and accountability to businesses. If anyone out there is listening and they want to learn more about that, message me and I can get you some information about EOS. EBITDA, of course, is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Yep. I've written an article about that. It's not the silver bullet of valuation, but it is oftentimes a metric that's used in assessing the enterprise value of the business. And the enterprise value of the business is the sale value of your business, which takes me to what probably is going to be our last question here for the day, Jim, is when business owners think about exit, if they're thinking about exit. Some of them are told you need to be thinking about the exit from day one. Some business owners will tell you, I'm going to die in my chair and I'm never going to leave. Somebody told me once that you may not be for sale, but you can always be bought. So you've got to be sale ready.
Yep.
What do they do? How do they navigate those waters about thinking about the end?
Yeah, it's funny. I had a mentor of mine once tell me, his firm did a lot of research and what they found is that everybody dies. And at minimum, what we have to recognize as business owners is that a transition of some sort is inevitable, right? It just is. Assuming your business doesn't go out of business, right? Assuming you cash profit, we've taken care of all that stuff. Your business now as an entity is living on. Is it living on in your name? Is it living on in your children's name beyond yourself? Is it going to be a sale, a true sale, asset, stocks sale, or an ESOP? Or is there some mechanism that this business is going to transition away from you? And I think the answer is probably yes. It's just a matter of time. And I would say, as if you're listening to this, you're a business owner. I think and I own a business. I'm thinking this. I have young kids right now, so I'm not there yet, right? Wherever there is, but I have to be thinking about this proactively. And I would encourage anyone who owns a business to simply just start asking yourself the questions. I think, give yourself the permission. And I think I see a lot of, especially business owners who have sat in the seat for 20, 30 years. Let's face it, it's comfortable. It's what we know. We're attached to it. There's sentimental value in it that transcends the P&L and the balance sheet and the 5 things I just talked about, right? But give yourself permission to start thinking beyond that. What is next? And when you give yourself permission to start thinking those questions, I think it starts to unlock some of the things we need to talk about, which is, well, if that is true, and it is, what do I have to do to position myself to get to that point successfully? And to especially if we're talking legacy business, we have a couple clients right now who are they're in the throes of it. They're like, hey, mom and dad been running this thing for 30 years. Now the kids are in the 30s and 40s and it's their turn. How do we set the company up so that they are successful in what they need to do? And we can unpack that. But I think these are just some of the questions you have to, as a business owner, have to start thinking about. And then if you're not thinking about a legacy component of the business, because we have some clients who, hey, the kids want nothing to do with this. Let's face it. And that's fair, right? So we got to sell this thing. This is our asset. This is where our primary wealth is tied up in. It's on this balance sheet thing that we don't really look at that much. And we got to now be concerned about it. So I think, again, same concept, though. Start asking yourself the questions, what's next? How do I prepare my business for that? And I think at least from my perspective, and Dave, I know you can speak into this as well. One of the first things you should be doing when you start to give yourself permission to ask that question is don't go at it alone. This is you've built a multi-million dollar asset potentially that has a lot of moving parts. It's fairly complex. It's probably more complex than you even give yourself credit for because you know it inside and out like nobody else ever will. And you might even think, well, this isn't that, but no, it is complex. And somebody who might want to come into your business to buy it as an asset needs to fully understand and see what it is for what it is. So we can talk about the fact that your financials need to be ready, right? Your accounting system needs to be ready. We talked about EBITDA and gross profit. Yes, you need to know that operating wise, right? To make sure that your business is operating at its fullest potential. But at some point, somebody else is going to want to know what those numbers are for real, like the real one. And I think we can't get caught in thinking that this is just going to go on forever without us. At some point, we have to be able to just kind of open the books, be transparent with what's happening financially, and be prepared to have that conversation, which takes some work.
Yeah, and everything that we've talked about on this program, from the idea of putting together controls, financial discipline, systems, processes, people, all of those things done right are going to increase the value of your business enterprise.
Yeah.
So this is real money we're talking about here, gang. And Jim, as you mentioned, for most business owners, if they're sitting down with their wealth advisors and looking at a portfolio pie chart, and you drop in the slice that says the value of my privately held business, I don't have to do evaluation to tell you that that's going to be the largest slice of the pie.
100%.
And make sure you manage that appropriately. Unfortunately, we're out of time here, man. I could spend another half hour with you, but
Easy.
maybe we'll have to have you come back another day to continue this thread.
Love it.
But for now, tell the audience where they can find you if they want to learn more about you and how they can work with you.
Yeah. So our website, www.backbonecfo.com, easiest place to get to us. And then feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Jim Emerich. I'm all over LinkedIn, and between those two things, we can love to get in touch, help you if you're a business owner or scale your business.
And you'll find Jim's bio in our show notes. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Dave, thanks for having me. It's awesome.
It was a lot of fun. Love talking about this stuff. And thank you out there for tuning into Behind the Numbers. If you liked what you heard today, please take a moment, leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. Those things really do matter. It makes a difference in creating more visibility for the program. And while you're out there, don't forget to crush that subscribe button so that you don't miss an episode. Until next time, my name is Dave Bookbinder, and I'm reminding you that the numbers tell the story, but the people bring it to life. Take care, everybody.